Hello friends, and welcome to another video on my channel. Today we are going to be customizing this Mattel 110 scale RC Batmobile from the Batman. Now, I've done a review of this on my channel, and I also did a video of the customization of this McFarlane Toys Batman. So if you haven't seen those, feel free to check them out. Here's a closer look at the Batman figure. I have a whole thing on the process and the parts I used, etc. But today we are going to make the Batmobile itself look more weathered. This is a really fantastic scale vehicle, especially for the price. It was $100. It's an RC vehicle. You know, it lights up, it moves. It's got rubber tires. There's an interior. There are no opening doors, unfortunately. Some people have shoved Batman in through the passenger window. I've not tried it because I like to pose my figures next to the vehicles, but really great piece for the value, especially in light of the Hasbro Pulse $350 Dodge Charger, which is great. I mean, it looks amazing. I don't want to take away from what Hasbro has done with that, but this is also based on a Dodge Charger. This thing has a lot of bells and whistles on it visually, and it is less than a third of the price. So, but the one thing this doesn't have going for it is that it doesn't have a lot of paint detail. It's pretty much just the molded plastic, right? In my review video of it, I mentioned that I wanted to do a weathering pass on this vehicle and just make it, you know, a little dirtied up, a little more lifelike, so that it doesn't read as much as just kind of a molded plastic like it is. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be taking just a few different kinds of paint and applying them in a way to make this look like it has been through the ringer. We're not going to overdo it, because that's something people do a lot of times. They will do too much, and I think it detracts from the vehicle and the realism and believability. We're going to do some mud spray. We're going to dirty up the wheels and tires a little bit. We're going to do some silver dry brushing to kind of make it look like this thing has, you know, had stuff flying at it or barreled through some stuff. So let's talk about supplies and then we'll get to it. All right, so the nice thing about this is it's going to be pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and you don't have to have a lot of artistic ability to be able to do this bit. So if this is something you want to try, if you have this vehicle and want to try following along at home, I welcome you to try it. It's going to be pretty user friendly. So we've got my Deco Art Americana acrylic paint. This is craft store stuff. You can get it at Michael's, Hobby Lobby, stuff like that. I will have an Amazon link below if you want to get it online. And then a few brushes here that I've had for a while. This was from a big set that I got on Amazon, so I'll share that link as well. And then this one I've just had for a while. I'm not sure where I got it, but this is the brush that I use for dry brushing metallic stuff. And the reason I have a different brush for that is because the metallic paints have like kind of silver glittery little flecks in them that make them shiny, and that can mix with your regular paint and end up kind of making stuff sparkle when you don't want it to. So I keep that stuff separate. But we've got a shimmering silver color here. We've got black and we've got brown. Or really a burnt umber technically, but basically just brown. So that's pretty much it. We're going to get right into it and I'll show you how I'm going to use this stuff. Okay, so after looking at a couple reference photos, there are two more paint colors I want to use. We're going to pull out this zinc, which is just kind of more of like a darker kind of grayish metal color, and then neutral gray. And we'll get into why. But so first of all, looking at this thing, you've got these reinforcement pieces here, right? Now these are meant to be like a single piece of metal framing that runs all the way through, I believe. I think that's to reinforce the front end of the vehicle. For that, we're going to use the zinc. So, you know, these you can see they're kind of that swirly plastic that you'll see on like Marvel Legends and things like that. So we're going to take some of that zinc and work it off the brush a little bit so that the brush is still pretty dry. And we're just going to take it and kind of run it along this. Now, might be kind of hard to see, but what it's going to do is just give it a little bit more of a metallic look and make it read less like plastic, especially on some of the defined pieces like these tab things that kind of stick up. It's going to get caught on the raised edges, and that really helps to kind of sell the look. Now this plastic is pretty smooth, so it's not going to take to it exactly as I want it to, but once the paint dries a bit, it will actually give me some traction for the next layer. So we're just going to kind of put it on sparingly. Again, you don't want to overdo this kind of thing. If you paint all of it on at once, you're just going to have kind of a globby, sort of brush streaky version of it, and that's not what we want. So, and this is really going to give it like some variations, and that's what we want, because right now the only variations are the kind of swirly bits of the plastic, and it's very reflective. This paint is going to dull it a bit, and that's what we want. All right, now it may be a bit hard to see, but this top piece is also in the reference photos I'm looking at. This whole bumper looks metallic as well, so we're going to hit this with that same kind of dry brushing, but we don't want this one to be as streaky, so we're going to go one direction and then the other, and that will kind of even out some of the strokes. We're just going to kind of dust the paint on there. And we're going to go in this direction here, because as the car moves forward and, you know, plows through things, they're going to bounce off of it that way, right? So I'm just going to kind of keep with that. And you can see how little paint is actually on this brush. We're just kind of kissing it with the metallic paint there. You can see, yeah, we're just going pretty light on there. Now I had a little too much paint on there, and it was getting a little streaky, so I'm kind of buffing it around, and that helps to spread it out, get it more evenly. Do that on the other side too. Now it might be a little hard to pick up because this is black and the light is not at the best angle for this, but can you see the difference between having the paint on there and no paint? So it really does help bring it to life. So if you're trying this and you have a new brush, it won't work quite as stiffly as this one, but if you keep it relatively dry when you put the paint on it and you don't put too much, it'll give you a similar effect. All right, now we're gonna hit these beams again a little bit more. These bars, I guess. I don't know what these are called. They're almost like an I-beam kind of thing, but if you know what these are called, let me know in the comments. I'm curious. I'm doing a little dabbing because this metal is, or this plastic is so slick that sometimes the paint will just move around on the surface of it without really sticking if you're stroking it on with the paintbrush. So if you dab it on, it can kind of help get you the effect you want. So that's made a nice difference already. Next, I want to do the wheels the same way. Now, we're not going to go over the whole thing, but you figure these are metal, you know, they're painted black or powder coated or something. So some of that's going to come off as this vehicle gets wear and tear on it. When dry brushing, it's always best to go for the raised edges. So we'll hit these lug nuts with a little bit of that paint, and then the ridge around the center of the wheel here. This is very subtle, but it really makes a difference. All right, so we're gonna do all four wheels like that. These back wheels are nice the way that they're set up. It's really easy to just drag the brush across this part and kind of get it all in one swoop. So it's got some nice highlights there now. I'm gonna do these step pads too. I'm going a little heavier on these because these are actually metal on the vehicle itself. And the nice thing about acrylic paint is it is water soluble. So if you mess up, you can just take like a wet towel and wipe it off. You know, you may want to use a spray fixative, like a clear coat on this if you want. I'm not going to, because I display these in a case behind plexiglass, and nothing's really going to mess with them. And I don't, you know, I'm not out driving this thing because I bought it for a display piece, so I'm not worried about the paint rubbing off. But acrylic paint is pretty hardy too. I mean, you really got to mess with it, I think, to get it to come off of a lot of surfaces. So this is also a metal piece. This is this little side vent here, so we're gonna hit this too. Doing this other step pad here. It's fun, you can see the difference where I painted and where I didn't. And you know, it's details like this that really just bring life to the sculpt. When you can use paint to bring out more life from it, it's so cool, because you know, these things are mass produced, right? So like, they can't go in and paint every single one of them. I mean, they could, but if they did, they would have to charge a lot more. And we'd all be crying that it was a $350 Hasbro Pulse vehicle. But you know, for less than 20 bucks worth of supplies and, you know, not a lot of artistic know-how, you can do something like this. Okay, next I'm using just a little dab of the silver. Like, not much at all. I'm gonna get it on the brush. And in the photos that I'm looking at, you can see that there's some scratches right here into the paint. So again, we're just taking the dry brush and just doing some little streaks there. Nothing too crazy. It's not really in the photos, but I want to do a little bit up top too. Just a few streaks up here to give it a little more life to this plastic. Again, nothing wild, not way too much, just, you know, enough to look like this car's kind of been through the ringer. This is actually something that I should probably do to the tumbler that I made as well, because it's a little pristine. That is a project for another day. And if you've not seen my tumbler, I built one out of an old Batman Begins playset that was shaped like a tumbler. It just happened to be right about the right scale for the 7-inch NECA figure of Batman Begins. So I got the $20 playset on, I think it was eBay, gutted it, rebuilt portions of it, painted it up, and wired some lights into it. So check that out. That's I believe a 4-part video process on my channel. All right, so next we're gonna add some dirt and mud. So we're taking our brown paint and I mixed in a bit of gray for some variation. And we're just gonna take a bit of it and add water. And then in the photos, it sprays this way, right? So what we're gonna do, I'm just gonna mask off the top part of it so I don't get the interior dirty. We're gonna take this brush and we're gonna get some directional mud spray. Boom, look at that. Instant mud. It's perfect. You can get some here, back here. Okay, we're gonna flip it around and do the same to the other side. Now, the more you load up on the brush, the bigger the splatter will be. With a drier brush, not as dry a brush as we did the metallic stuff with, just not with a ton of water so that the paint will actually stick to the plastic, we're gonna go in and just kind of muddy this part up. So again, in the photos, you can see it's just kind of like streaked with mud. So we're gonna let the brush bristles kind of do their thing. We're not gonna do like a stroke on. You see how I'm just kind of dabbing it on in random ways? You can kind of accentuate the streaks by adding a little bit of a, like that. Instant mud. Let me get some here. And then the tires get a little dirty too. So again, just kind of dabbing it. And this, I mean, you can even take your finger and just kind of smear it so that it gets the color on there, but it's not like brush strokey and not like super heavy with the mud. Because again, we don't want to overdo it, right? And dabbing with your finger can help to kind of diffuse the paint so that it's not too heavy in certain spots. When I was a kid, I never would have done stuff like this. Like, that would have seemed crazy to me. I didn't have money growing up, so like getting a toy could be kind of rare sometimes, and like you wouldn't want to make it dirty and crappy right away. But now I understand the value of it, obviously, as an adult and an artist. but as a kid, I wanted to keep all my stuff as nice as possible. All right, so that is really looking a lot more realistic and believable now. The next thing I want to do is work on the motor area. So again, beautifully sculpted, but a little too clean, right? A little too pristine. So what I want to do is take the black paint and we're going to do a wash. So again, not a ton of paint, just a little bit. And we're going to add some water. Now, this does have a light in here, so I don't want to go too crazy with water around the electronic stuff, but I'm just going to take this, move the brush around in the crevices, right? And because it has water on it, it's going to settle in there into the nooks and crannies and stuff a bit. And on the raised surfaces, it'll kind of run off into like the recessed areas. And that's just going to give us a much more realistic look to this stuff. And you can take a rag or a towel or whatever and just kind of dab at the raised parts, the areas where like there isn't like a crack for it to go into, just to get some of the excess off. But you can see like in this area in the headers, like it's finding its home in there. So that's exactly what we want. One thing I want to try to do is I'd like to try to paint this belt here black. I am going to get out this smaller brush because I want to take some of this black and paint inside these pipes here, just to give them the illusion that they're recessed, that it's actually like a bored out hole in there and not just like a silver flat surface that was molded. And then as far as the wash is concerned, I think that's looking a lot more, you know, greasy and believable in there. So that's pretty cool. This really is such a cool design for a Batmobile. I really love this version. All right, taking a closer look at the photos again, and these hood clips are actually silver. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a mixture of the zinc and the silver paint. And I'm gonna try to get in here and paint these. Now, I've got a pretty steady hand, thankfully, so I'm able to knock this out without making too much of a mess. If you don't, feel free to, like, you know, you can tape off around it and cut it with an X-Acto knife so you know, kind of mask it off so you don't make a mess, or skip this part entirely. Totally up to you. All right, and then also these little rivets or something are silver as well. So okay, so the last thing I want to do here is just a little dry brushing overall. So I'm mixing some black and gray, and like very subtly. The brush is real dry, and I'm just kind of taking it and going over some of these edges, because it's just the car is just too flat. It just looks too much like plastic. So I just kind of want to give it some life over all these little edges. It may not show up super well on camera, but to the naked eye, it's given it just enough variation to make it look like kind of a weathered flat paint job. And you can see I'm using so little paint that I can do this and it's not doing much to it. But it just kind of dirties it up and gives it, you know, almost like a dusty quality, like this car has been out on the road, been smashing through semi trucks, causing multi-car pileups. And I'm being pretty judicious about where I put it, but like on all the raised edges, you know, anywhere there's like details, you just kind of like dust it on there. I think lived in is kind of the operative word. You want this to look kind of lived in. And again, using my finger, if the paint's too heavy, you just kind of smear it and that diffuses it and gives it kind of a dustier look. I'm a comic book artist by trade. That's my day job. I write and draw comic books. And I got a portfolio review at a convention once from legendary comics editor Bob Schreck. He edited The Dark Knight Returns and a bunch of like seminal works of comics. And I had drawn a barn on this page, and I had used a ruler and my micron pens, and I like made this. I was like, this is going to be like the nicest looking barn, but it was supposed to be like an old kind of rundown barn. And so he looked at it and he was like, this is a good drawing of a barn. Like, I can tell it's a barn. He's like, but it's too pristine. Like, I'm not going to step in any poop in this barn. Like, you gotta use a brush and let the wood get all kind of gnarled and uneven, and, you know, don't make it like such a like technical drawing. And that really changed my whole outlook on the way I did stuff and the tools I was using to draw and ink my comics. And I tell that story because I think it's a good kind of metaphor for this vehicle, right? Like, it was too pristine out of the package. It didn't look like it parks in a underground, you know, disused subway terminal with bats flying all over the place. And I think this is just about done. So maybe add a few more passes in a couple spots, and then I'm going to get this thing on the turntable and we're going to take a look at the finished product. All right, so here it is on the turntable, and you can get a better look overall at what's been done to it here. I think the lighting is a little bright. It can be difficult to capture certain details with like the bright overhead light kind of casting a shadow against this plane here, where most of the detail has been done, but I think you can really see the difference there. And I'm actually, it's a small thing, but I'm really happy with how the belt turned out over here, because the black is like this flat color, and so it really does look like the kind of rubber material that these belts are made out of. Yeah, all in all, I'm very pleased with how this turned out, and you know, it's a cool thing. I mean, all these supplies that we used are super inexpensive, easy to get, and it just goes to show you with like what you can do with just a little bit of paint. Better look at the front end there. Yeah, I really like this kind of brushed metal look this thing has. The wheels and tires really look used now. I think that mud splatter really just sends it home. So there you have it. This was a quicker one. You know, not a complicated build or anything like that, but this was a fun little project I've been meaning to do, and it felt really good to knock something off the to-do list. This section of my display feels a lot more complete now, because every time I looked at it, I was just looking at what needed to be done to this car. So, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. You know, it's something, again, that anyone can do, and so if you have one of these, or if you're planning to get one, I hope you find this helpful. If you do have any questions about it, let me know down in the comments below. I always get back to people. And if you'll stay tuned until the end, you will see a brief trailer for one of my graphic novels. And there's a link below on where you can find it. The book is called Retroactive, and it's kind of a spy-fi thriller that's like James Bond meets Groundhog Day. There's time travel and espionage and a cool time loop aspect to it. So I'm really proud of it. I hope you'll check it out. That's going to do it for this video. Until next time, keep your head on swivel.